Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paula O'Brien, and I am the Director of the Division of Consumer Protection. I'm excited for the opportunity to share the work of the small but mighty team of advocates that fulfill the responsibilities of the Division of Consumer Protection with you today. Today, you will hear from the Division's 4 units: Consumer Services, Utility Intervention, Investigations and Enforcement, and Consumer Policy, which all work together to protect New York consumers from economic harm. So to begin with, I welcome Katie Sherwin, the Director of the Consumer Services Unit. Good afternoon. Thank you, Paula. I'm Katie Sherwin, Director of the Consumer Services Unit, the Division of Consumer Protection. As Paul mentioned, our overall mission is to protect New Yorkers from economic harm. The Consumer Services Unit contributes to that mission with 2 programs: Consumer Assistance and Outreach and Education. The Consumer Assistance Program provides direct-to-consumer services. One way is through its Consumer Helpline. The Consumer Assistance Program operates the helpline Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30, and we take calls on any number of consumer-related issues. So, for example, consumers are encouraged to call the helpline if they would like information on a company's reputability. So, say, for example, you're interested in working with a particular contractor for a home improvement contract. You can call our helpline and speak to one of the advisors and see if we've received any complaints about that particular contractor. In addition, if we spot any trends in the marketplace, so say there is one particular company and we're receiving a lot of complaints about them on a particular issue, we will refer that information to the Attorney General's office for further action. The Consumer Assistance Program also leads our Identity Theft and Mitigation Program. So in 2019, the FTC received 650,000 complaints nationwide for identity theft. And New Yorkers were the victims in 36,000 of them. So unfortunately, these numbers continue to rise every year. And chances are all of us know somebody who's been a victim of identity theft. So to try to combat this, the Division of Consumer Protection develops the Identity Theft Prevention and Mitigation Program. Consumers who are seeking our identity theft services, again, are encouraged to call the helpline to speak to an advisor. Our advisors are trained to provide information on how to prevent identity theft, including what steps to take if a consumer's personal information has been compromised. So, for example, if your information was part of a security breach. We provide information on how to identify signs of identity theft and where to look, and also what to do if you've been the victim of identity theft. So scams are the #1 category of complaint to the Federal Trade Commission. The most common scams are imposter scams. Imposter scams are where a scammer pretends to be someone else trying to trick you out of money. How many of you received a call perhaps from Microsoft Tech Support, right, or the IRS? So these imposter scams come in a lot of different forms. And last year, New Yorkers lost $82.6 million to frauds and scams, and a vast majority of them were these imposter scams. So if you receive a scam call or a call that you think might be a scam call, again, we encourage you to call the Consumer Helpline. You can speak to one of the advisors, and they'll be able to give you more information about whether or not the call that you're receiving is likely a scam. And finally, mediation. So mediation is perhaps the most significant service that the Consumer Assistance Program provides. It's a voluntary mediation program, and to talk more about it, I'd like to bring up Tanya Bowden. Tanya's been with the Consumer Protection Board and now the Division of Consumer Protection for 29 years, and she's now the supervisor of the program.
Thank you, Katie. Good afternoon. My name is Tanya Bowden, and as Katie stated, I am the supervisor of the Consumer Assistance Program. The Consumer Assistance Program mediates disputes between a consumer and a business involved in a transaction. Here are the types of complaints that we handle. Some complaint examples that you may have experienced in your home might be: you're a customer of a fuel oil company and you're on automatic delivery. Your delivery doesn't show up and you're low on fuel. They didn't deliver the correct amount of gallons, but you were charged the full amount. Maybe you've been contacting SiriusXM Radio to cancel your subscription by the end of the term, but they renewed your contract without your authorization and are still taking money out of your account. One of the complaints that comes to mind that our program has handled was a senior citizen who entered into a contract through a door-to-door sale for a vacuum cleaner that she would have paid over $1,400 for. When her daughter visited her a few days later and read the contract and realized her mother would be making payments for the vacuum for a period of 2 years on a fixed income, she contacted the company, and the company stated that because the grace period had expired, the contract was now binding. It was then that she contacted the Division of Consumer Protection. We reached out to the company on her behalf, and we were able to facilitate the contract being canceled and the return of the vacuum cleaner. So anytime a consumer is aggrieved and in the marketplace and is unable to obtain a refund or a resolution on their own, our consumer advisors are poised to assist. If you'd like to file a complaint, these are the ways that you can file. You can go to our website, fill out a consumer complaint online, or you can download the consumer complaint form. If you're not sure your complaint is something that we handle, you can call into our 1-800 number, speak to a consumer advisor, and they will walk you through the complaint and determine if it's something that we handle. If it isn't, we will make sure that you get to the appropriate agency or department. If you have any questions or anything that you want to discuss today, I'm available at the end of the presentation. We also have consumer complaint forms if you'd like to take one with you. Thank you.
So it's important to note that the Consumer Assistance Program staff and the consumer advisors last year handled over 15,000 inquiries and complaints, and that work returned over $1 million to New York consumers. So they really do amazing work. So the second half of the Consumer Services Unit is the Outreach and Education Program. The Outreach and Education Program is designed to inform, educate, and empower consumers. We do this through our website that contains a wealth of helpful information through consumer alerts and press releases, via social media, Facebook and Twitter, and also through our vast selection of printed materials. I've put a collection of our brochures over here. We have brochures, pamphlets, palm cards. Please feel free to grab a few on your way out if you'd like. The Outreach and Education Program also provides live presentations. We offer them on scam prevention, identity theft prevention, financial literacy, product safety, and we are continually putting together new presentations to meet consumers' current needs. The Outreach Program presents to community groups, health organizations, libraries, church groups, parent-teacher associations, even businesses who are looking to offer training to their employees. We really will put together programs for any audience. So recently, one of our focuses has really fallen on children and children's safety. So did you know, for example, that children are 35 times more likely to be victims of identity theft? And most people don't know this, which is why that educational program has really become important to us. We also offer programming on furniture tip-over prevention, environmental risks for children, children's product safety. There are a number of things. So our goal is to reach as many New Yorkers as possible. If you're interested in attending or hosting a presentation, please reach out. You can request a presentation anytime through the link on our website, or we have request forms here. There are some on the table as well. So whether we're mediating disputes on behalf of consumers who have been aggrieved in the marketplace, educating consumers about product safety or credit management, or helping them recover from identity theft, we are always working towards our goal of protecting consumers from economic harm and empowering consumers to make smarter, safer decisions. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce Erin Hogan. She's the director of our Utility Intervention Unit.
Thank you, Katie. UIU has the statutory responsibility of representing consumers' interests before the Public Service Commission, also known as PSC, and federal regulatory agencies such as the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, known as FERC. This statutory authority encompasses electric, gas, water, and communication industries. Due to the limited time today, we are focusing on the electric industry as an example of our work. Plus, it is the sector that is with the most anticipated changes in the foreseeable future. UIU consists of me, 2 utility analysts, Greg Collar and Danielle Pankow, and 2 attorneys, Jillian Cassow and Katie O'Hare. We also have consultants that assist us with representing consumers at the New York Independent System Operators, also known as New York ISO, who administers the wholesale electric market. I'll give you a brief overview of this electric system to frame the discussion and give you a flavor of the wholesale electric work, and we'll then turn it over to Greg and Danielle to discuss the policy and rate case processes. So first, consider the electric system that is foundational to our economy and our modern lifestyle. This essentially is a large machine that consists of generation, transmission, and consumer demand, also known as load. It generally can be delineated by the bulk power system and the distribution system. The bulk power system on the left consists of large generators and high voltage transmission lines. It makes up the wholesale energy market, as I mentioned, is administered by the New York ISO. The distribution system on the right consists of the lower voltage transmission, distributed energy resources, and consumer demand, and is the responsibility of the respective electric utility. All utilities, but especially the electric utilities, require multifaceted expertise in engineering, economics, and law to facilitate the delivery. Now to the wholesale energy market, or in New York, as we call it, the New York ISO. The electric market is designed to maintain reliability. I can't emphasize that enough. It's designed to maintain reliability while facilitating efficient markets. Approximately 50% of our generation is located in the western and northern part of the state, while 65% of our load is located in the eastern and southern areas. Maintaining reliability for a system that can collapse in fractions of a second requires numerous market rules. These rules, of course, must be evaluated and changed from time to time and can have significant monetary impact to consumers or the generators. Consequently, the proposed market rule changes discussed at the New York stakeholder processes can sometimes be very contentious. The wholesale electric market is the supply portion of your utility bill, also known as the commodity portion of your utility bill. The electric market is made up of 3 categories: energy, ancillary services, and capacity that collectively are structured to balance generation and load to maintain the system. Additionally, the New York ISO is responsible for conducting planning studies to meet reliability standards and inform the market of investment opportunities. These planning studies are also vetted and voted on at the stakeholder process. New York's ambitious renewable and emission target reductions will affect both the bulk and distribution systems. With this in mind, the wholesale energy market rules are being evaluated to assess what changes are needed to accommodate the transition from generally controllable generation to high penetration of intermittent generation such as wind and solar. So for example, in December, the New York ISO issued the 2019 Reliability and Market Consideration for a Grid in Transition. This white paper was intended to identify emerging reliability and economic challenges, present initial gaps, and propose next steps. This slide illustrates how the revenue from an existing simple cycle fire generator would change from the existing market structure to the future without proposed market enhancement and a future with enhancements in carbon pricing. As you can see, under the existing market rules, energy comprises over 50% of its current revenues, while ancillary service market is the smallest. In the future, With revised market rules, capacity is expected to account for the vast majority of its revenue. And if the proposed enhancement in carbon pricing are adopted, then there would be no revenues from energy. As proposed rule changes are presented at the stakeholder process, UIU assesses how much it will cost consumers and will customers get what they're paying for. I'm simplifying this significantly, though, for the purposes of this discussion. On the distribution side, New York State has combined 6 electric and gas corporations: Con Edison, Orange and Rockland, Central Hudson, Niagara Mohawk, also known as National Grid Upstate, New York State and Electric and Gas, Rochester Gas and Electric. There are 10 gas-only companies, the 3 big ones being Keyspan, New York, Keyspan, Long Island, also known as National Grid Downstate, and National Fuel out in the western part of the state. Notice the gas utilities have very sporadic service areas, unlike the electric that is throughout the entire state. I'll turn it over to Greg to discuss the policy cases at the PSC.
Good afternoon. Again, my name is Greg Collar. I'm a utility analyst here with UIU, one member of our robust staff of 5. So as Erin mentioned, a good majority of UIU's work is dedicated to intervening on behalf of consumers in rate cases and policy cases before the Public Service Commission. I will be providing a brief overview of the policy case process and an example of a policy case that UIU recently intervened. To give you an idea of the scope of our work in the last year, in 2019 alone, UIU participated in about 10 policy cases. As Daniela mentioned, about another 11 rate cases that we also participated, that we also were involved in 2019. Policy cases usually initiated either by a series of questions or proposals from the Public Service Commission, or any party or entity may file a petition to either commence a new case or reopen or re-examine an existing case. So this slide here, I'll just go briefly through the bullets. This is kind of the step-by-step process. First, the Secretary of the Commission will issue a notice soliciting comments from parties to the case and from the public. The Commission will also issue notices in the New York State Register that, as you may be aware, is issued by Division of Administrative Rules, or DAR, that is housed here within DOS. I think our attorney is here that is responsible for that each week. Yeah, there you go. Next, the notice filed parties will respond to the questions or the petition that was presented initially. After reviewing all those comments that have been submitted, the Department of Public Service staff will review those comments, then come up with file a new proposal, or what we call sometimes we'll issue a white paper. Once that white paper is issued, parties will then respond, have another opportunity to respond. So that once that process is done, the Commission then, or DPS staff will then review all those comments, various rounds of comments, and present it to the Commission at one point where the Commission will issue an order, or lack of a better term, a final decision. I say at some point because in a policy case, unlike in a rate case that Danielle will discuss further, there is no statutory requirement that the policy case that a Commission act within a certain time frame. In a rate case, we do have that. In fact, in my experience, there's been a few cases where it's been many years since they've acted. I don't know one case, but one started before I was here 15 years ago, and it still continues to this day. Next slide. This is an example of a recent case that a couple years ago, a policy case that we were involved in. But before I go into that, an example, for the past 20 plus years, customers of electric and gas utilities who were in receipt of a home energy assistance program or HEAP grant were deemed low income and thus qualified for additional monthly assistance on their utility bill. These monthly discounts have been a debated topic in utility rate cases, again, that UIU intervenes in, and Danielle will discuss further after me. These rate cases have, I would say, in the past 10 plus years or so, majority of the time have reached a settlement as opposed to going to litigation. And these low income discounts were typically horse traded, lack of a better term, among the various parties in the case and were set arbitrarily. There was really no clear cut criteria or calculation how we came up with these discounts. So again, here's a slide. This is a case that started about 2014 or 15, called the affordability proceedings. Again, it's an example of a recent policy case that we were involved in. This proceeding was commenced by the Commission for a variety of reasons, but the main reason was to standardize these discounts across all the utilities in the state. The standardization, according to the Commission, will allow a more streamlined process that conserves resources for the intervening parties, including UIU, again in our robust staff of 5, allowing such parties to focus on other areas of the utility's business or operations in the rate case that can potentially have a major impact on the rate. Second bullet, advocacy. Just in the case, we initially started out, UIU recommended a 2-phased approach. The first phase, we recommended an expansion of eligibility beyond the HEAP criteria to include the Lifeline discount. If you're not familiar, that's a telephone discount for eligible income consumers. But the Lifeline program includes, besides HEAP, it also has other assistance programs such as SNAP, or as we call it, or food stamps, temporary assistance, SSI, that would also qualify you for the quote-unquote low income. So expanding this eligibility to this Lifeline criteria would ensure that more eligible customers are enrolled in these utility monthly discount programs. Our second phase of our approach or recommendations in the case, since low-income customers have a disproportionate percent of their income that goes towards their utility bill compared to customers with higher income, in some instances as much as 30%, we thought there should be some parity among ratepayers in shouldering this energy burden. Such a high percentage of these low-income customers have to make some difficult decisions each month. Do they pay their utility bill, or do they pay their food for that month, or do they pay for their medicine for that month? Difficult decisions to make, obviously. Therefore, UIU advocated to develop a more sophisticated system to achieve a targeted energy burden and address the affordability gap with each monthly discount based upon that consumer's family income to achieve what we thought would be a good starting point of a targeted 6% energy burden each month. So as a result, as I mentioned in the previous slide in the process, after a few rounds of comments and CPS staff review of all these comments, a new framework was established by the Commission. The new framework has improved the structure of the discount programs and standardized them across all the utilities. It created a tier discount level that is actually, there's actually 4, tier 1 being the lowest up to tier 4 with the highest. And it was based on a family income to more closely align it to the actual need of the customer. To give you an idea of the impact of the new system or new framework, currently there are 1.6 million customers statewide currently enrolled in the utility monthly discount program. Under this new methodology that was adopted by the Commission, there's now $248 million that is allocated to all these utility discount programs, an increase of about 87% from the prior program that was in place. That's great. However, even with these increased benefits for this vulnerable population that UIU has rigorously advocated for in the past, there are some trade-offs that we have to account for. Such an increase in these benefits and budgets, this $248 million are unfortunately costs that are borne by the ratepayers. Ratepayers including low-income customers themselves, non-low-income customers, residential non-low-income customers, and small commercial customers that the UIU represents. So there is that balance that UIU must strike when advocating for such increases to these programs. One example is the most recent Niagara Mohawk rate case, which I imagine most of the DOS employees here in Albany have Niagara Mohawk for their utility. Increases in the long-term program budgets accounted for $46 million for electric and $6 million for gas. That was a major driver of the rate increase that was ultimately approved by the Commission. So again, there is that balance that we have to account for in each of these cases. Lastly, an update recently, New York City filed a petition in December, which a study was conducted by the city that indicated, according to their study, that the discounts were in fact not achieving the 6% energy burden for low-income customers as was envisioned by the Commission in the new framework. The Commission acted on this petition pretty swiftly as compared to my experience. And in fact, we're meeting actually next week, next Thursday, to reconvene among all the parties to reevaluate this. So UIU will be actively involved in this case as it moves forward. I'll now turn it over to Danielle to give a little further look at what we do for rate cases.
Thank you, Greg.
Good afternoon. One of the functions of the unit is to represent consumers in utility rate cases with a primary focus on residential and small commercial consumers. Again, my name is Danielle Panko. I'm one of the analysts here, the second analyst here, with extensive background in utility rate making. As for utility rate cases, I have performed such tasks like writing testimony as an expert witness, testifying at hearings, and participating in settlement negotiations. Before I go in more detailed discussion about utility rate cases and rate making process, let's understand more about utilities and their distribution systems. A utility company delivers basic, essential services such as electricity to homes and businesses via a distribution system. As Erin explained before, the electric grid can be broken down into two sections. Costs associated with these sections are known as supply, or otherwise known as commodity costs, and delivery costs. Supply costs are the costs associated with generation and transmission of electricity, which are outside the red box shown in the figure on the top right slide. These costs are determined by the market rules developed at NYISO and are not associated with the rate case. Delivery costs are costs associated with the utility distribution system, which you can see in the red box, and include items like poles, wires, step-down transformers, and meters. You can think of those costs as closest to the customer in a specific geographic area, as shown in the picture below. These costs are associated with the rate case. New York covers a large geographic area, and each utility service is unique. As such, rate case costs may be different. For example, downstate utilities are more urban than upstate New York and require portions of their system to be built underground, which is more expensive than building above ground. Next slide. Utilities are regulated in New York and are overseen by the Public Service Commission. An administrative law judge presides over the case. A utility will file for a rate case to recover the appropriate costs of operating, building, and maintaining the distribution system safely and reliably. Specific rate case costs include labor and union costs, digging up roads and streets, paving, pipeline replacement for gas, distribution control center, call center costs, customer programs like low-income programs, energy efficiency programs, and it could include many others. To put in perspective the magnitude of cost, Con Edison, downstate in New York City, operates one of the most complex power systems in the world, serving 3.4 million electric customers or accounts and 1.1 million customers in the New York metropolitan area. One of the largest investor-owned energy companies in the United States, the utility company had approximately $13 billion annual revenues and over $34 billion in assets. Next slide. So how many individuals receive a utility bill from National Grid in the Albany area? I know I do. Mostly everybody probably does here. Here's a bill example where you can find the costs that will be impacted by a rate case. As I mentioned before, costs can be broken down into delivery and supply costs. A utility rate case costs are mostly found in the delivery section of the bill, as shown in this slide. It's worth noting some of the line items shown in the slide are related to policy cases, while these costs are not the majority of the delivery costs. Also note, the utility rate case will not impact the majority of the commodity section or supply section of the bill. That's not shown on this slide. However, each New York utility website provides an explanation of each of the line items shown on a typical customer's bill. Next slide. There are many parties that are interested in utility rate cases, for many reasons and may intervene depending on the location of the distribution system. For example, we start with the utility company, obviously would be there, New York Department of Public Service, consumer advocates like our unit, environmental groups, industrial groups, individual customers, and other interveners like the City of New York, Walmart, and specific municipalities or cities. All decisions by each of these parties are considered in a rate case. If our unit does not intervene, then the larger users may allocate more costs to residential and small commercial customers. Next slide. Here's a typical rate case process. It starts with the utility preparing for a rate change request. It typically takes 1 year for a utility to develop a case and put together volumes of testimony exhibits and supporting work papers. The 11-month rate case process will start once the utility files with the Department of Public Service, where a case number is assigned. It is an extremely time-consuming process, 11 months. For planning purposes, the first 4 months are the most critical for our unit. In months 1 through 4, there are volumes of testimony filed by the utility alone. It includes thousands of pages of exhibits. Each volume includes hundreds of pages of just the written part of the testimony, including the exhibits. Data requests are performed during the time and can be extensive. A significant amount of information is reviewed by our unit, and a strategy is developed before our unit files testimony, which occurs around month 5. There's not a whole lot of time. Months 5 through 7, other parties may file testimony and exhibits, including ourselves. Additional data requests are generally requested for those parties and are reviewed by our unit. Rebuttal testimony may be warranted. During this time, also confidential settlement negotiations may occur, where all parties lay out and negotiate their position, also time-consuming, or evidentiary hearing may occur. The last one we participated in took 3 weeks, not including the time that we prepared for being involved in that. By month 11, the commission order will be filed and new rates will be established. Next slide. Our unit intervenes in rate cases to ensure the record of the rate case is complete, which is ultimately reviewed by the commission. The unit determines if utility and other party testimony exhibits are appropriate for utility rate making purposes. Such topics include utility cost of service, for example, to ensure small users receive their fair share of utility costs and those users are not disproportionately burdened. Other examples are revenue allocation and rate design, depreciation, advanced meter infrastructure, low-income discounts, which Greg mentioned before in the policy section. However, these costs may also be disputed in utility rate cases. Next slide. So lastly, this slide shows a list of UIU's and our unit's involvement in New York rate cases in 2019. The unit participated in 11 utility rate cases, and Greg, I believe, mentioned another 11 or so policy cases. We represented approximately 4.5 million electric customers and 6.2 million gas customers. Any of our rate case filings can be found on the New York Department of Public Service website. If anyone has questions about our unit or the cases we are involved in, please feel free to reach out to us. I will now turn the discussion over to Bob Kassler from the Investigations Enforcement Unit. I think we're taking questions after.
Thank you, Daniel. Hi, I'm Bob Kassler, and I'm a recovering telemarketer. Yes, I owned a telemarketing and marketing research company for 25 years before joining the Department of State. And now I'm director of the Investigations Unit, where we enforce New York State's do not call and telemarketing laws. The number one question we get is, why do I get so many robocalls? What got so bad? How did this happen? To understand this, you have to understand what's changed over the past 10 years. Back in 1995, when I opened my first call center, the dialing equipment to open a call center was very expensive. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars. Phone lines. You actually had to run phone lines from the central office of the phone company all the way to your facility. And that cost tens of thousands of dollars. It was a significant barrier to entry. You had to have a location, fancy that. You had to have a place where people came to work. They put on headsets, they made phone calls, and you actually had to send out paychecks. That was a significant obstacle for many of today's telemarketers. Today, life is in the cloud. With life in the cloud, you don't need to buy equipment anymore. The equipment is already there, it's out there. You maintain it through, you dial through a web portal, you set everything up. You can be sitting on a beach somewhere and you can control your dialing from there. There are no phone lines to run. The phone lines are already connected. You don't need any credit, you're not buying any equipment, you're not running any phone lines. Nobody needs to know who you are or where you are. You just give them a Gmail address and some money and off you're going. The phone calls are now delivered through the internet. With voice over internet protocol, some people have phone lines, some don't, most don't actually. And the whole transmission of your telephone conversation is way out there in the cloud. So the telemarketers can set themselves up real quickly. They could plug into an internet connection, decide they overstayed their welcome here, and plug in somewhere else. The caller ID, they have complete control over the caller ID. So when you get a telemarketing call and it shows somebody else's telephone number on it, somebody you know it's not them. It's the telemarketers. They control entirely what you see. The geography, as I had mentioned before, they could be calling from any place. And since they don't necessarily need people to do a robocall, they can unplug and move around as well. So no location is needed. And unlimited long distance made a big difference too. Robocallers can call you for the same cost for 1 million calls as if it cost one. So if they have unlimited long distance phone service, they can keep calling you and hounding you, and it just doesn't matter because all they need you to do is pick up once. So if you're the 1 in 1,000 people who actually says yes, they did great. So you press 1 and you get forwarded somewhere and success for them. So how does their business model work? I mean, really, does anybody actually answer these calls? What kind of business model is it? Well, if 1 in 1,000 do answer it, here's how they make money on those. It's a lead generation framework. So what's happening is they have a robocall and it calls you and it says, hi, interested in health insurance? Press 1. You press 1, and what happens? You get forwarded to some call center out in the Philippines. Person in the Philippines asks you a few questions, decides if you're a good lead, and then your call gets forwarded to some company here in the United States. That company here in the United States then sends a check to the phone company, to the telemarketing company that generated the lead. That telemarketing company was an illegal company making illegal calls, and they just got money. They essentially laundered the phone call for the guy who paid the money in the end. Because when we call that guy up and we say, hey, you're robocalling this, I didn't make any calls. They didn't. It was forwarded to them from somewhere else. So they make it very complex, something we're working on. The phone calls are also delivered in a very complex mechanism right now also. Phone calls, if you don't sign up with a long distance service and then they connect you from you to the customer, these guys sign up with resellers who buy their service from another reseller who buys it from another reseller. And ultimately, the guy who starts the call, the wholesale company, is totally insulated from the company that dialed the phone. So they tell us we have no relationship with them. And by the time we figure out who made the call, we discovered that, okay, we found this guy, we found this guy, we found this guy, but this guy turned out to be offshore. So we hit that dead end. So some of the calls we're getting today. We're getting a lot of spoof calls. Does everybody here get spoof calls, or am I the only one? Okay, I see a few hands. Has anyone here gotten a call from Apple Computer? Well, let me tell you, Apple Computer is not doing telemarketing. These calls from Apple Computer, they show their phone number of their local Apple Computer store, and when you dial it back, lo and behold, the person on the other end is Apple Computer, and it really is their phone number. But it wasn't Apple who called, they spoofed it. There's that kind of impersonation call, but there's a more dangerous one where we have government impersonation. We get calls from the IRS or Social Security threatening to take back our Social Security number. And they show us the phone number of the IRS or Social Security on them. And it looks believable, especially the first 100 times it happened, we believed it. Maybe the 101st we stopped. We're getting calls that look like they're from our neighbors. We get calls where it looks sort of like our phone numbers, maybe a few digits off. And then the most dangerous on this list is the contact list spoofing. Facebook and LinkedIn, there were data breaches. Their contact lists are out there on the dark web, and there are scammers out there who have them. So we're getting calls now showing phone numbers of people in our contact list focused on us. So when we see them, we believe them. So you're a grandparent. You get a phone call showing your grandchild's phone number there. And they say, listen, we have your grandchild. You have to send us some money or we're not releasing you in big trouble. A lot of people have fallen to that. And the average loss from those kinds of scams is about $4,000 or $5,000 each. It gets worse before it gets better. The next layer of that scam is that, okay, yes, they're showing us caller IDs from our contact list, but the calls they're making to us aren't necessarily in the person's voice. Well, the next generation, it's already started. Deb has found the first case in New York State where a company is where somebody is cloning the voice of a person based on the social media or wherever they're getting their voice. So they build a library of voice recordings, and based on that, they use software to emulate the person's voice. Then they call you showing that person's caller ID phone number. And it didn't, the one in New York State didn't work because the person didn't fall for it. In the UK, there was a CEO who got a call like that and was convinced to send $243,000 to the scammer. And what's this message? Did they hear you?
The robocall.
While they're working on that, I'm going to tell you that it's not all doom and gloom. Rosa and Antonio will tell you in a moment about a bunch of investigations we've done and how we've had some great success finding some people. We have some new techniques and we have some tools in our chest to catch a whole bunch of these guys. And I'll turn it over to Antonio and Rosa, wherever you're. Oh.
We're over here.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Robert, for jinxing that, right? My job.
Good afternoon. I'm Rosa Hollenbeck.
And I'm Antonia Losi.
And we are part of the research team for the investigation unit.
Our job is to track down the violators of the New York State do not call laws. And often that can be a very difficult job. Like chameleons, violators have advantages which they use to avoid detection. They are quick change artists. They're very fast, they're very mobile, and they're masters of technology. And they can also change the corporate IDs very easily.
Yes, but however, unlike the chameleon who uses his color change mechanism to obtain food and avoid predators, violators of the do not call laws use confusion and impersonation tactics to get consumers to respond. Now, these bad actors want your money or your identity, and they use some pretty sneaky tricks to obtain these.
Violators are masters of caller ID confusion. The phone rings, you look at the caller ID, it looks like a number that you may know. Maybe it's a relative, maybe it's a doctor's office, maybe it's a government agency. So you want to answer the call, right? But it's just a trick that the bad guys are using just for you to pick up that phone call. So you answer it. It's a robocall. Now you're annoyed. So you call the number back and surprise, it's a dead end. Why? Because the bad guys buy the phone numbers in bulk, or they spoof the number like Bob Casper had mentioned earlier. And generally, each of these numbers is only used once or twice, and then they're dropped. From there, they simply go on to the next call, and they repeat the same process over again.
Now, this is very frustrating for consumers. But the good news is that these bad actors are not as camouflaged as they may think they are. Right now, we have a current investigation that involves a healthcare insurance ring. And in a massive telemarketing campaign, they used 7,000 individual phone numbers. And they called over 1 million residents of New York State and nationwide. Now, in the vast majority of these calls, we found that they had the phrase, be healthy and blessed, or be happy and blessed at the end of each of their robocalls that they had placed. Now, that phrase provided us with data and a clue.
That's right. Using that clue, we went to the complaint database and cross-referenced the complaint, looking for the same similar phrases. We found thousands of them. Then we compared the caller ID, phone number, information that was listed on a consumer complaint. Using that information, local and long-distance carriers were subpoenaed in order to discover who was using these particular phone numbers within a specific time. From there, thousands of calls were ultimately traced to 4 companies who were the key members of the marketing blitz.
Now, without benefit of the data gathered from special sites, it would have been extremely difficult for this unit to find information necessary to turn these clues into facts. Now, this type of information is highly sensitive and is not generally known to the public, and it's not available as well. From these sites, we obtained social security numbers, addresses, asset listings, criminal records, bankruptcies, phone numbers, and much, much more. And once this is obtained, it enables us to connect the dots in order to put together the state's case against these violators.
Now that we have our case, our next step is to contact the violator and to give them a chance to respond to our charges. Now, while research plays a large part in what we do, other equally important responsibilities need to be completed. One of these includes the constant updating of the information in the in-house database, which enables this unit to work efficiently in keeping pace with violators and their evolving use of technology. This helps us in building each case for prosecution.
And now, to discuss the importance of consumer complaints and outline the unit's investigation process, I give you over to our colleague, investigator Deborah Sabunia. And Antonia and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Rosa. Thank you, Antonia.
Good morning, good afternoon. I'm Deborah Sabunia. I'm an investigator at the Investigations Unit. First, let's have some participation. Who here has received a telemarketing call? Who here has made a complaint against that telemarketing call? All right, there's one, there's 2. Okay, well, we need a little work on that. Who here has their phone number registered on the Do Not Call registry? Oh, that's much better. You're halfway there. Let me tell you why it's so important to file a complaint. Complaints provide the data for the investigation. Information found in the comment section of the complaint aids in analyzing and identifying the violator. Just like Rosa and Antonia were saying, be healthy and blessed. That helps us identify thousands of complaints. The complaints are then added to the case. The violator is contacted to answer for each complaint we investigate. I personally call every single person who filed a complaint, and that sometimes reaches a lot. I have a particular case right now where there's 684 people I have in my agenda to call. I ask affirmation questions that assist in building the case and supporting the fine. An example of an affirmation question is, was it a robocall? Well, if it was, then we gotcha, because that's important, because a robocall means another violation, and another violation adds to the fine. It's that easy to register on the Do Not Call registry. Go to the Federal Trade Commission at www.ftc.gov, dnc.gov. There's one place to register your phone number and one place to register your complaint. Here's a helpful tip. You only have to register your phone number once. That's it. You can also make a complaint by calling 888-382-1222. It's that easy. Have I convinced you to maybe make some complaints? Let me end my presentation by saying that each complaint is the foundation of the state's case, and without them, nothing will change. So be part of the solution and register your complaints today. Thank you. I'll hand this over to Paula.
Thank you, Deb.
You're
Great
welcome.
job, guys. So finally, I'm going to talk about the Division's Marketplace Safety Program. We also enforce the Children's Product Safety and Recall Effectiveness Act, which requires durable juvenile product manufacturers to register in the state and to provide notice of incident forms to the state when there is a recall. In addition, retailers are required to post recall warnings and recall notices for any children's items that are sold. And children's items are anything marketed for someone under the age 12. Durable juvenile products, that's for children under the age of 5. You might have heard of the recall over the summer with the inclined rocker sleeper that was incredibly dangerous. The division was actively engaged in monitoring that situation and working with EOH to call for its recall from the marketplace. In addition, annually, the division goes out into the marketplace and purchases of about 10 different toys and has them tested from an independent lab and during the holiday season. And they are tested to be compliant with state and federal standards for lead, phthalates, and mechanical hazards. In December, the division purchased and identified a toy doll sold at the Dollar Tree that you see there that showed it contained 246 times the legal limit for the phthalate DEHP, which is a known endocrine disruptor. And that phthalate was in the doll's head, which you can see is the most prominent area. So if a child puts that in their mouth and they're sucking on it, that is dangerous for their development. So we alerted the public and worked with the Dollar Tree to remove the product from the marketplace. In addition, the division serves as the New York State designee for the Consumer Product Safety Commission. And with that relationship, we actively are in the marketplace to ensure safety. We do recall effectiveness checks out in the marketplace. And we do resale store safety and education visits, going to resale stores like Goodwill, Salvation Army, making sure that they're not selling any recalled goods and helping them identify what they're not supposed to be reselling. In addition, there's targeted consumer education campaigns that we engage in for fire safety, home safety, and that is included in that. And so we belong to the final unit that comprises the DCP, which is consumer policy. It's been a very active program this past year. It is the policy research and advocacy arm of the division. And as the consumer marketplace landscape continues to change from bricks and mortar retail outlets to online enterprises that enjoy little to no regulation, the division is consistently working to identify new opportunities for consumer protection advocacy. Most specifically, the division has been concerned about digital consumer privacy. As the amount of information that our phones, that we use with our smartphones continues to grow, every day we're creating a digital data imprint. And what that information is used for and how it is used is not regulated. And it creates incredible vulnerabilities. Every day we're hearing about data breaches. How does that affect us? And so that's the area that the division has been highly focused on in this past year, because those vulnerabilities create fraud, identity theft, and the misuse of personal data. The division has been engaged with the governor's office in looking into consumer thoughts and concerns on data privacy. We have here the Data Privacy Consumer Survey. If you haven't already completed it online, I would be most grateful if you could take it. You can fill out the paper form. You can hand it back to anybody at DCP so that you can be counted. We're wrapping up. We've been doing this survey for the past year. And it's really going to be an integral support for any data privacy legislation that moves forward. You know, we're right now in the 2020 legislative session, and there's a wide variety of proposals advanced. And so this information, real tangible consumer information, will allow your voice to be heard so we can best help to regulate everyone moving forward. In addition, this year the division was super excited to have 2 policy proposals advanced in the state and as part of the governor's budget proposal. One of those was the Stopping the Nuisance robocalls, which addresses some of the current concerns that Bob mentioned in his presentation. It serves to increase do not call fines. It requires telecom providers to block robocalls and implement call authentication to work to unmask those calls, those calls. And near and dear to my heart was the gender equity pricing, which is commonly referred to as the pink tax, which will require that products that are substantially similar should be charged the same. So if you're going to shop for your child's pink and lavender Lego table, it's for your daughter, it should cost the same as the primary colored one for your son. So we are super excited about that proposal. In addition, we are always looking for new ideas to explore. So if there's something anybody sees in the marketplace, whether it's you or yours, or there's things that are coming up, please stop by and share them with us. We're deeply concerned about the things that go on, and that's our responsibility. So in addition, I'll just quickly go over, we serve on 16 different statewide bodies. We also have an established advisory councils to address specific consumer problems, and we're always working to promote fair business practices in the state. So I conclude and ask you, I open up the floor to questions for myself or anybody in DCP, and I note that we brought the giveaway today is the bag. So on Sunday, we are no longer using plastic bags in New York State. They're not giving them out, so you have to bring your own bags. We have some bags for you to bring. And they can charge, some people have been asking questions, they can charge you up to 5 cents in certain municipalities for paper bags. So you may be walking out with an armload of stuff if you don't bring the bag. Thank you. Any questions? Misha?
Well, I think everybody did such a great job. Debbie, I will now file a complaint.
It only takes a second.
I had a question for the UIU group, and it's like just a basic one. Is there a max that the utility company is able to make in profit?
So that's part of the revenue requirement, and what is debated, a company generally comes in and asks for return on equity, and then there's cost of debt. And it's essentially for those who've done accounting, it's the weighted average cost of capital that it ends up being the rate of return that is comparable. And so what utilities historically do is they come in and ask for way more than the levered debt. And then most often in New York, we go through settlement process and we get it down. So it's a balance that the Public Service Commission does have a formula that they use for an ROE. It's not formally stated. It was the proceeding to what Greg described, that they started it. Staff issued a recommendation, but the commission never acted on it. By not acting on it, it gives latitude. Generally speaking, the staff, when they come in with their testimony, they generally use that formula rate to generate an ROE, which historically utilities never, they balk at. They cry at everything. And so generally speaking, is there a cap? Yes, it's formulaic. It ultimately is negotiated because there's a relationship between the cost of debt and the cost of equity and what the rate of return would be. And then there's also a balancing act, as Greg kind of described. From our perspective, we were seeing what the low-income discount would do to all consumers. What ends up happening, and it sounds perverse, but if the ROE is too low, Wall Street, in how they view the cost of debt, would be perhaps higher than it otherwise would. And the company is going to get their money, no matter what the company gets it. And so is it better to kind of be a little proactive and go a little higher on the ROE in anticipation that Wall Street won't react to it so negatively? And we have had situations in rate cases that we were warned, if you go that low, we're going to have a negative credit rating and the cost of debt goes up. And sure enough, it happened. And so it's a constant balancing act with a bunch of variables to try to arrive at what is supposed to be just an acceptable rate. Okay?
How often are these rate requests coming out into council? Because it's an 11-month process. So is it just
So a litigated case,
1 year's over and they just
and
start
that's
up again?
our nightmare. So what happens is some utilities file its rate case, and when they file it, they clearly document all the costs for just 1 year. And then they can come and say, but we're open to exploring a multi-year settlement. in Kedley, National Grid Downstate, came in actually with 4 years in its filed testimony. They were seeking settlement for 4 years. That did not go well. And so that was the evidentiary hearing that Danielle was referring to that we just had. So we'll have the great pleasure of seeing those people again next year. So it's very challenging in terms of going into settlement because it's hours and hours of hours sitting in a room where you're not at your desk doing work. It is Greg described. We have 5. Other states like Texas has 24 people doing what 5 do. Now we do hire consultants for the rate cases. Given the timeline, we generally keep it a very narrow amount so we can get the contract in place as quickly as possible because as Danielle described, we don't have latitude of time. It is a firm deadline, whether it's a litigated case or a settled case. That testimony is filed and boom, we cannot be a minute late. So yeah, we have this year the anticipation because it's a 3-year settled case. We're expecting National Grid to come in, upstate, NIMO, and because of, and they're expected to come in the May timeframe. We're going to have Central Hudson coming in the summer timeframe, and then we'll have Orange and Rockland coming in the fall timeframe. And Corning, thank you, I forgot. And Corning just filed. If all those go to settlement, trying to divvy up resources to sit in those meetings to cover all the bases is really challenging. So in some instances, a litigated case, even though you do it on a yearly basis, might end up better with just and reasonable rates for consumers, and it may be more efficient too. So it's a tough call.
Thank you.
Sure.
How do you guys decide what kind of toys you here? You guys often find problems with them?
Let's see. We found something. It seems to be about every other year. We've had years where everything is compliant, and you really look at the manufacturer, kind of the packaging, where does it come from? A lot of this product comes from China, and that was the genesis of the law when it was created back in 2008. It was during that time of 2007 when Mattel, Hasbro, all the big names had, dangerous lead in toys and such. So this was New York's response because the feds were not acting. But now the federal government also has a regulation on board. But it's really just looking at it, and cost point. We try to really focus on stores that are affordable, and because that's where when that margin gets thinner, it definitely did not adhere to the consumer's benefit. Anybody else? Thank you so much for coming. Don't forget your bag.